We are live with David Alpert, CEO of Skybound Entertainment, one of the busiest men in Hollywood, with Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, Outcast, many more things that we're going to talk about coming up on TV Guide Live. Hey everybody, I'm Alex Albin, Managing Editor for TVGuide.com. As mentioned, I'm here with David Alpert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you are a busy guy, so we appreciate it. And we appreciate you guys out there too. Send in your questions, facebook.com/TVGuide or hashtag TVGLive on Twitter if you got questions about Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, David Alpert's personal life, absolutely anything like that. Just hit us up, and I'm sure he's an open book. So we'll get into that in a moment. But first, we actually just had Michael Cudlitz in here, and he confirmed who Negan kills on the season finale of The Walking Dead. So I just wanted to double confirm it with you that it's...
That it's nobody.
Oh, all right.
Yes. No,
okay.
Exactly.
So one thing actually that we did talk to him about is the difficulty of doing or challenge of doing a press tour around The Walking Dead this time out. What's it been like for you?
Well, it's one of those things where I've actually had people come up to me in restaurants and offer me large sums of cash and just be like, look, seriously, just tell me. Nobody needs to know. And I'm sort of like, I wish that they understood what's coming next. Like, people are so focused on this initial moment. The rest of the season is so much more intense than that moment. That moment's going to be, like, devastating to so many people. But beyond that, the season, like, just... there's a brick on the accelerator of the car of The Walking Dead, and we're going off a cliff this year.
Yeah. Just to stay on that moment for 1 second. So... when the episode aired, my initial reaction is, oh man, one of those actors, they're gonna have to do the whole press tour, do the whole promotional tour. Did you guys talk about how to embrace that at all? I mean, obviously everybody is here, I believe, in New York, and everybody's going on Talking Dead. To make somebody who is immediately off the show take the press photos, do the rounds, everything, was there any concern there?
Oh yeah, but you know, I mean, one of the great things is the nature of the show is different than pretty much any other show that I think has really been done. Everybody knows when they sign up that they can be written off the show at any moment, right? That anybody's zombie food at any time. And so as a result, we actually have like a really incredibly close-knit group of people. It like sort of forces this bonding in a way that you don't normally get. So when we ask people to do, you know, very, very difficult things, people are really up to the challenge. So our crew is amazing, our cast is amazing. So you know, in that scene, when everybody's there, normally when you would do coverage of that, everybody else would go home, and so you would be doing your lines to a tennis ball or a stand-in or something like that. But everybody stayed for every single take. So they were there because they wanted to sort of be part of this moment, because they knew that this was a special thing that was never going to happen again.
One of the things that I think is so interesting about how The Walking Dead has progressed, particularly over the past couple of seasons, is the structure. You've embraced the, I guess, eight episode structure. Scott Gimple and crew have really played around with time and the visuals on the show. I'm thinking of the episode where Tyrese, spoiler, died, where it was like a dream sequence. It was like a dream watching it. Is that something you're going to continue to push in season 7?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely the 8 and 8 structure at first was sort of like, we were like, what are we gonna do with that? I don't know if you remember, season 1 was 6, then it was 13, then we went to 16, and we've been there ever since season 3. But getting into that 8 and 8 structure was like, okay, this is actually, in a weird way, it's kind of a blessing, because we get 2 premieres and 2 finales each season. So it allows us to structure the show a little bit differently. And I actually think it's something that I hope more shows embrace, because it's been great for us.
Yeah. The Walking Dead has, correct me if I'm wrong about the stat, but been pretty much the #1 show for years and years. Does that create more pressure going into a new season, or less pressure?
You know, I think everybody's been saying that we're sort of over as a phenomenon since, I think, episode 2. So it's one of those things where it's like, yes, there's definitely high expectations, but I don't really think that we feel that type of pressure. The pressure for us is really, can we deliver a show that's as good as the comic book? And that's really the thing that we feel most deeply.
Yeah, I know you can't spoil anything about the upcoming season. Certainly we've seen...
I'll tell you everything.
Oh, great, that's good. But if you could use one word to describe the upcoming season, what would it be?
One word?
Sure, or a phrase. A short phrase would also work.
Gutted. I feel gutted by this season, and in the best way that I feel about any so even shows that I don't work on. When I saw the Red Wedding on Game of Thrones, I was gutted because I didn't see it coming. And when it happened, it just caught me entirely off guard. And even though we know this moment is coming, I think that this season is just so intense, and really sort of as a fan, like it reaffirms my emotional connection to the show.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about Fear the Walking Dead. I
Yes.
love Fear the Walking Dead.
Great.
I think the show is so good, and it gets to humanity in a very different way than The Walking Dead does. How'd you feel overall about the second season? I mean, it was a longer season. You did embrace. It wasn't exactly 8 and 8. I think it was like 7 and 8, something like that.
Yeah.
But how taking a look back at it, what was your feeling about season 2?
You know, I think anytime a first season show there's always bumps, right? As you're sort of finding your way, you're getting to know everybody. When you do 6 episodes, it's sort of like just as you're finding your rhythm, you're done. So getting into season 2, the great part was season 1 we bounced between Los Angeles and Vancouver and back to LA, and season 2 was all in Mexico. So that was really that part was great. The crew expanded, the cast expanded, and that part was great. We really sort of started to figure things out. But honestly, I feel like it was really at the end that we got our rhythm. And so now I'm like, great, now we have a rhythm. I feel like we're positioned incredibly well for season 3. I think, honestly, Nick, played by Frank Delane, has really come into his own, both as an actor, but also as a character on the show. Like, I think he's really incredibly charismatic and dynamic, and really just, I can't wait to see I can't wait for you guys to see what we're gonna do with him this coming season. So anyway, I feel like, we learned a ton, and we really sort of figured out like where our actors are strong and where they're not, and really how do we play to their strengths.
Yeah. It's tough to look at Fear the Walking Dead without also looking at The Walking Dead and compare them, and I think they very much have veered away from each other as shows. But there almost seemed like little notes, particularly in the second half of the season, where it was Fear the Walking Dead responding to certain questions in The Walking Dead, like, why doesn't everybody smear themselves with blood all the time? And so now everybody's smearing themselves with blood all the time. Or, hey, how does everybody keep finding each other in the woods? And from Travis's perspective, it's faith, and there's some sort of greater purpose going on there. Is that something you guys talk about at all, to answer questions on Fear the Walking Dead that are posed on The Walking Dead?
It's something we actually set out not to do, but it's one of those things where it's like, it comes up, right? Like, you're in the room and you're talking about an idea, or you're talking about a concept, and you're like, okay, well, there was something like that happened in season 3, like, what if we did it like this? And there's no way that you have to reference what we call the mothership, because if you don't, like, the fans will. So if you're not doing it, it feels like you're making a mistake. We try not to do like a 1-for-1, where we're sort of saying, oh, this episode we're doing this episode here, but we do try to find a way to be like, okay, how can we evolve, and like, what would it look like if we took a strain of the same DNA and sort of grew it this way as opposed to that way.
Yeah. So how do you look at Fear the Walking Dead going into season 3? With season 2, we had very clear, what if zombies were on the water? And then the second part was, what if zombies in Mexico? I mean, that's really just very to the base level. But do you look at that look at it going into season 3 as that modular structure exploring different aspects of the Walking Dead universe, or is it something else?
I think the show lives and dies as to whether or not we believe and embrace our characters, right? So I think that, Nick has really sort of become this very interesting guy. In a weird way, when we met him, he was embracing death, right? Like, he was ODing on drugs, he was, running away. I mean, he was really doing everything to set himself up to die. And in a weird way, I think he's really well suited for the apocalypse. I think the apocalypse has kind of like cured him of his disease in a way that I think was surprising to us on the show. Like, as we started seeing, we're like, yeah, this really works. This really makes sense. So I think that evolution as to sort of who survives and what skill sets are useful in the apocalypse. Like, I think Travis, he was a great moral teacher. And what we've seen is like that just doesn't work, right? So in the real world, he was actually a bedrock of stability and usefulness and vibrancy. But here, you can make the argument that he got his son killed, and that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the other stuff you're
Please.
working on, because there's so much. Outcast is again, a Robert Kirkman show, you know, so you're still working with kind of the same guy, but at the same time, to my mind, it's way scarier than The Walking Dead. You know, there's gross out moments and there are terrifying moments in both Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead, but was the goal there to head into even more of a straight horror show with this?
You know, I think for us, we love playing, Robert and I, we love playing in the horror sandbox, but everything for us comes from a point of view of character. So, you know, we start with Kyle Barnes, and it's basically, you know, he feels, and the thing we did, I think, that Robert came up with, it's a very atypical place to start a lead of a show. He's passive when we meet him, right? He's essentially cut himself off from the world, sort of because he thinks that his presence endangers those that he loves. So he's locked away in this house, living by himself, with no contact with his family. And through being drawn out, he sort of now realizes at the end of episode 1, like, I'm ready to re-engage the world. So in a weird way, it's an uplifting journey of discovery for Kyle Barnes, surrounded by demons and exorcism and horrible things that go on.
Yeah. You've now adapted Walking Dead, you've adapted Outcast from Robert Kirkman's book. Eventually, I assume you're going to run through his whole catalog. When are we going to get Science Dog?
You know, that's we're working on that now. No, we don't have anything with Science Dog. We had done Battle Pope back in the day, but we'd love to bring Science Dog. And if you could start a petition for us, great, thank you.
Hashtag Science Dog TV. I'm not good at hashtags. Don't worry about it. But do you have an eye at all to and the rest of his catalog? I mean, Invincible, there was a motion comic, I think, but we haven't really seen a live action Invincible. We haven't seen a movie version of Invincible. Is that something you guys have an eye towards?
I can announce that I'm not yet ready to announce something giant about Invincible, but I think if this goes well and you don't hate me at the end of this, and you have me back, let's say, next year, there will be some gigantic announcements about Invincible. So I would, you're on the right scent, I just can't say anything yet, otherwise he might slit my throat while I sleep.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's move on from Robert Kirkman because we don't want him to harm you. You do have another TV show that you're launching, I think, here at New York Comic Con semi-officially, but Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. Douglas Adams is so hard to adapt in a certain way. He has such a specific tone. What was it like attempting this on TV?
Well, you know, so Max Landis, who wrote and created the show, you know, when he looked at the book, because it was one of his favorite books as a kid, as well as one of my favorite books as a kid, when we showed him and say, hey, look, let's talk about this as a TV show, he goes, you know, there's a reason why most Douglas Adams adaptations don't work. And I was like, why? And he goes, because they're telepathic in a way. They're speaking to you inside your brain, so they're not really, you're not following a linear story. It's sort of the reactions of the characters are happening inside your head. So he goes, the only way to do a faithful adaptation of Douglas Adams is not to be faithful to Douglas Adams. So you have to entirely embrace the spirit that Douglas sets out, but you cannot follow the letter. So in a weird way, it's the most faithful adaptation of Douglas Adams' work to ever happen, although I would say 90% of it is created by Max. But if you've read the books, and you watch this show, you'll be like, oh yes, that is 100% Douglas Adams.
Yeah. Just real quick, because some of our audience may not be familiar with Dirk Gently, what's the general gist? What's the pitch of the show?
So Dirk Gently, he's a holistic detective. So that basically means that he sort of follows the nature of the universe, and his investigations often involve sitting around waiting for things to happen, and then when they seem important to Dirk, he will follow them to someplace else. So it is it's a comedy that is sometimes really dramatic. It is a procedural detective show that has no clues, and it's also it's a love story that's entirely platonic.
All right, cool. And Elijah Wood is in it. That's pretty exciting. He's had such an interesting career. What was it like working with him?
Elijah's amazing, and you know, this show asks our characters to do some really interesting, weird, and wacky things. To go from you know, tearing out their hearts at one moment to doing crazy, wacky, over-the-top, funny things the next. And Elijah couldn't have been more game to do anything that was asked of him. He's a real, true professional, and I think you'll see him in this show unlike you've ever seen him before, and I hope you guys love him as much as I did.
Yeah. One more question, because I do want to get to your guys' questions. Keep sending them in, facebook.com/TVGuide and #TVGLive on Twitter. You are opening up a new studio in Vancouver.
Yes.
How did that come about, and what what is that going to provide? How is that going to expand the Skybound brand?
So Robert and I, we had shot a movie there. We shot this movie Air with Norman Reedus and Jaimin Hanzu, and that was a great experience for us. We loved shooting Vancouver. It was great. We met some great people. We then went back for Fear the Walking Dead season 1, and we realized that we loved Vancouver. We loved sort of the people there, and we met this amazing woman named Catherine Winder, who in addition to producing The Clone Wars, which is one of I think the greatest things to ever hit television, she also just did the Angry Birds movie, and we're like, oh, like, she was great. We realized that we were all very much on the same page, and it was a great opportunity for us to say, hey, look, we're thinking beyond just doing stuff in Los Angeles and New York. What if we moved into Canada? And she was totally game to come play with us.
Yeah, there's so many other things that shoot in Vancouver. Are you going to be shooting Fear the Walking Dead down the street from Supergirl on the other side or anything like that?
We shot Dirt Gently there just now, and there was, when we were there was 46 shows shooting in Vancouver. So
that's crazy.
It was pretty insane.
Just a suggestion, but if you have the DC's TV superheroes head over to Walking Dead, they could probably take care of that whole zombie thing really quickly.
Honestly, we talk about this a lot. The problem is what happens when one of them gets bit, right? Like then you have like the Flash. You talk about fast zombies. Now you have like super fast zombies.
Yeah.
It gets really scary.
That would be pretty bad. All right, we won't let that happen. So you guys have been sending in your questions. Keep them coming. Facebook.com/TV Guide. #TVG Live on Twitter. So let's get to some of them now. Stephanie on Facebook says, why did you have to kill Chris? Yeah, he was crazy, but I enjoyed him on Fear. Spoiler, by the way.
Look, Lorenzo, who plays Chris, was an amazing actor, really did a great job. But I think, the decision to kill any character is never taken lightly. He really got to a place where he made the wrong decision. He went in with a bunch of guys that, he shouldn't have gone in with. He should have stayed with his dad. So you make a wrong decision in the Walking Dead universe, you're going to get capped.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, it's an interesting thing to kill off people on Fear the Walking Dead versus Walking Dead in a way, because Walking Dead, it's a makeshift family, right? It's people that have come together out of necessity and learned to love each other. Versus Fear the Walking Dead, it's a literal family. Like, they are the center of the show. Could you see a time where it gets away from that, from the Clark Manalas, to being a general cast like Walking Dead?
Yeah, I mean, I think The Walking Dead started that way too. You had Rick trying to get back to Lori and Carl. But slowly as you kill people off in the course of a show, the family becomes more makeshift. And I think as we see with the death of Chris, we're moving more in that direction on the show. So I think eventually we'll end up there if given the time.
All right, good. So watch out, Madison and Travis. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Lucy on Facebook's asked another Chris question. By killing off Chris, aren't we losing a very interesting evolution of a character? Well, how do you feel about that?
100%. I mean, yes, the death of Chris absolutely stops you, and that question is exactly what we want you to ask. If we ever kill off a character and you're like, oh, that storyline was done, well, then it doesn't hurt. It doesn't feel like a worthwhile death. But if a death of someone you care about hurts, which it should, then we feel like we've done our jobs.
Yeah. Last question before we let you go, and this is probably the most frequent question you get asked, I'm sure. Eugene on Twitter asks, is there a chance of a Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead crossover?
I mean, the biggest issue is we're in different timelines, right? Most modes of transportation have sort of broken down in the apocalypse. They're 3,000 miles apart. So I'll never say never, but I would say it's highly unlikely.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if you can clarify this because fans were going back and forth a little bit. I believe we've caught up to Rick waking up on The Walking Dead. Is that correct on Fear, or not quite yet?
Yeah, we've definitely gotten past that moment.
Okay, cool. Plug a couple of things before you go. New York Comic-Con plans. You have a ton of stuff coming up this weekend. Anything in particular you want to send people to?
Yeah, so this Saturday night we have our Outcast panel at New York Comic-Con, which is great. Today we have our Walking Dead comics panel. So please come down and check them out.
All right, very cool. David, thank you so much for being here. And thank you guys for tuning in. The world of TV is very complicated. We'll guide you through it. Stay tuned, and thank you.